The Boston Uprising, for lack of a better word, sucked in Season 2. After a respectable 4-3 finish in Stage 1, it all just got progressively worse. 3-4 in Stage 2, 1-6 in Stage 3, and finally, 0-7 in Stage 4. The season was filled with trades and starting roster decisions that just didn't make any sense to someone on the outside looking in. Many people, including myself, started wondering if the Uprising even wanted to win. That's why when it was announced that the Uprising's president of gaming, Huck, would be doing a live Q&A on the Uprising's Twitch account, a lot of people were excited. And also a little scared, considering the year's worth of frustration was likely about to release onto him. Also, he took questions from Twitch chat, which went about as well as you'd expect.
I'm a boomer. I don't think I am. I'm 89. It's weird.
But, over the hour and a half, he took it quite well, as I expected him to, and he really did tackle some of the hard-hitting questions that Uprising fans and Overwatch League fans alike had this season. I'm making this video because I feel like more people need to know that this happened and what he said. The stream hovered around 500 viewers, and I'm pretty sure Boston has more fans than that, and they would like to know what he said about the past, present, and future of this team. In this video, we'll be going over the highlights of this Q&A and talking about what it means for the Uprising moving forward. Let's get into it. So, the stream started off about as well as you'd expect. Why are you a C-word? And why do you throw my ranked games? Huck brushed these off about as well as you could have.
I don't intentionally. I try my best.
But I think it would have been better to just ignore them. Huck also talked about his role within the team this season and said he stepped back from coaching this year and trusted his own coaches more. Obviously, he wasn't satisfied with the job they did, though. This was when he leaked that the Uprising have signed a brand new head coach that he would reveal later in the stream. Whether this was an intentional strategy or not, this was actually a pretty cool thing to leak right at the beginning so that people would stay engaged with the stream to hear what it was. And yes, he did end up saying it, and I will talk about it later in the video. The next question, however, was the first really hard one, and it was about players' living conditions.
Why are the players living in cardboard boxes and living off of instant ramen? How strict is their curfew? Are they allowed one phone call after they enter your prison?
For those of you who aren't aware, this is a very, very exaggerated response to this article released by Benchmob and Yiska about a year ago during the offseason, which had a lot of accusations in it, a lot of reports of internal drama, rage quitting during scrims, that kind of stuff, and Huck would address that later. But the important part here is with the housing situations, which states 3 players were required to live in a 2-bedroom apartment with a mere room divider placed in the living area for the additional player. And Huck actually confirmed that this happened.
But what ended up happening is that I think there was 2 or 3 players that were basically staying in the living room of that apartment, and they had like a room divider. It was pretty spacey, but obviously not as much privacy as having your own room. But for whatever reason, people took this to an extreme level, and because it was such a memey fun thing to do, there was this perception that we had 10 players in one condo.
However, it's worth noting that the teams had a lot of say in how they wanted to live, and accusations of living in a cardboard box are obviously not true.
The cardboard box comment, I think, is that one time the Koreans did a stream. We had an off day or something, and they decided to cook food in the living room on the stream, and they were streaming. It was like a IRL stream. They were cooking ramen, and they were eating food off of these ramen boxes.
Huck went on to say that the Uprising actually spent more than most teams on team living, and pointed to other unspecified teams who were supposedly doing worse.
I don't want to disparage any other team, but it's very obvious, even if people look at content, that there are teams that have 4, 5, 6 players in one room living in bunk beds. There are teams that don't provide furniture for their players and they have to pay for everything.
Now Huck moved on to subs and why the teams made the decisions that they made when it came to their starting roster. Basically, he said that there are 3 reasons why a player could get benched. The first one was toxicity.
You have a player that sleeps during scrims or sleeps during review, doesn't show up on time, doesn't try and practice, doesn't communicate, is toxic, whatever. That might be a reason that a player doesn't get to play.
The second one was for personal issues like family or sickness, and the third would be if someone just wasn't as good. While of course Huck didn't specify who of their subs did what, it's pretty safe to assume that they ended up having to deal with all three. An interesting question brought up to Huck was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how successful were you at getting the most out of your players? Huck said
6,
and then later changed to
maybe 5.6, somewhere in there. I'm a stickler for those decimal ratings.
not very encouraging. He noted how difficult it was to get the team out of a rut when they were doing bad, which I can understand, but you have to get the team out of the rut somehow. The Outlaws did it, the Valiant did it, so that's not a good enough excuse for me. You just gotta do better. Then came probably the most bizarre moment of the entire stream, when Huck was asked what he likes to eat and drink for big brain plays, and Huck just decided to compare himself to Trump? Like President Trump.
I'm a big fast food guy too. I don't want to make too many parallels between me, president of Boston Uprising, and the president of the United States, but he also enjoys soda and fast food, and I do believe there is a lot of fake news out there.
Like, there was no one asked. The question was what your favorite food is. No one, nowhere was talking about Trump. He just brought it up completely unprompted. It was just weird. I don't get the point of doing it. I'm just gonna move on because I don't know what else to say, but it was just such an odd moment not to include. The next big question was when Huck finally addressed the trades that the team went through in the offseason. You know, the ones that seemed to weaken the team overall. He went through Striker and Neko pretty quickly.
He requested a trade. We were able to find a decent deal, so we traded him.
He did acknowledge that there were internal issues to be had with them, but decided not to go into detail, and I'm personally okay with that. When it came to Gamsu, the story was actually very interesting.
He's obviously very PMA, very good guy. Helped us a lot last year. He's obviously older, has a lot of experiences in esports. We were in a situation where we were looking at main tanks in the offseason. We had a talented one in Axiom on our main roster. Early on in the offseason, we were looking at picking him up, adding a little bit more depth to our current roster. So we picked up Axiom, right? We had Axiom and Gamsu. They were both playing and competing for a spot. Axiom won out in that. So at the same time, we were looking at Fusions. Obviously, very talented guy. We picked him up, signed him before he kind of really blew up into the World Cup. But then we're in this complicated situation, right? Now then we have Gamsu, Axiom, Fusions. Main tank, I think, more than almost any other role, or probably more than any other role, you really want it to just be consistent. After Axiom beat out Gamsu, Fusions and Axiom kind of fought for that starting position. Fusions ended up winning out. But now, no one wants to be a sub. Everybody wants to compete. That's why they're here. Had a great conversation with Shanghai. Their main tank at the time just wasn't competing, couldn't be there. They desperately needed a main tank. That meant Gamsu most likely was going to be a starter, was going to have this great opportunity. He already wanted to be traded. He could either be a third string main tank on our team or a starter on Shanghai. He went on to play on Shanghai. They had a pretty good season. You know, they could have made playoffs.
So at the time, it really did make sense to both sides. It's also worth mentioning that when it came to the Note and RCK trade, the Uprising didn't know that the role lock was coming when they made the trade.
I think in hindsight, we would reconsider some aspects of that trade.
So take from that what you will. At this point, Huck moved on to the questions from Twitch chat, and it became much more quickfire. When asked if the team was living in Boston, he said this.
The team, probably not. I think we're going to be focused on Foxborough most likely. That's where kind of the craft group offices in general are, kind of attached to Patriot Place. Our matches, though, our venues as far as competing, will be in Boston.
There was also an interesting conversation about high-profile free agents, where Huck confirmed before Season 1 that the team was in talks to obtain a very high-profile name.
I think even at the beginning when I first got this job, I had a pretty lengthy conversation around signing Seagull.
Seagull? Now, I don't know exactly how many teams were interested in Seagull. I'd have to imagine, most teams, other than the full Korean ones, at least had a little interest in Seagull, but I just can't help but imagine a Season 1 DPS line of Striker and Seagull. That could have been pretty hype, actually. Huck mentioned multiple times that he hoped to see more rivalries form in the league. He talked about his days in StarCraft 2 and the rivalries he had in them and how it made those games so much more important. He hopes that with regionalization coming in, rivalries will really be able to form, which makes sense. It's a little awkward to form real rivalries when you all work in the same building. He also addressed Dogman and what he got into recently with Unco and the Dallas Fuel and Arrow, and he had this to say about that.
Right, because Dogman obviously is one of the very, very few players that actually talks a lot of trash. And the problem is if you're like one of the very few guys that is trash talking, you just come off as the bad guy. Where, in all honesty, I think there just needs to be more. Trash talk's pretty healthy for the game. It drives competitiveness. It just makes things more fun.
Someone asked Huck why they decided to pick up Stellar, and the answer to that question was actually very interesting in hindsight. They picked up Stellar as a Tracer specialist?
Before we got to the newest patch, I think a lot of people... There was a strong possibility that Tracer was going to be meta, and we also did not have a lot of confidence in our current Tracer players. Color and Blase, I know you're here. Your Tracers aren't bad. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying Stellar's Tracer is really good, and yours is pretty good.
Also, who had the idea to put Blase on tank?
I think Blase. Blase had a habit, sometimes good, sometimes bad, of the Rhine.
When asked if the team had a defined leader, the answer was exactly what everyone was expecting.
Fusions for the most part. And if so, what do they do? Fusions is the only player I have worked with or known of that every single day he shows up. Every day. Some days you'll have a very dedicated player, but they're going to have an off day here and there. They're not going to come some days. The rest of the team's going to have to pick up the slack. Fusions every single day. This guy is like a rooster in the morning. If you're waking up at, if you need to wake up at 1 p.m., you don't even need to set an alarm, because our scrims start at 1 p.m. and as soon as our scrims start, he's just screaming.
And finally, after teasing it like 3 times throughout the stream, Huck finally revealed who their new head coach would be, and it's Mineral, who most of you would remember as the head coach of the dumpster fire that was the Mayhem. However, as more information has come out about what it was like to work with the Mayhem in Season 1 and in the beginning of Season 2, you begin to wonder how much of it was actually Mineral's fault. Besides, Huck seems really excited to work with Mineral. I'll just let him gush for a bit so you get the idea.
Did not have great results previously on the teams he was on, but we have talked about it, and I've seen a lot of the reviews he's done. We've had a lot of conversations. This is a guy we wanted to pick up mid-season as an assistant coach, and we've kind of promoted because he's shown the work ethic and what he's looking to do, and we've seen eye to eye on some things. And I want you guys, if you're a true Boston fan and you're here for that instead of the drama, I want you to go look at his reviews, see the work he's been putting in. He's definitely a lot more low-key. Mineral. We're picking up Mineral. And I'm so excited.
This seems like Mineral's big second chance as a coach in the Overwatch League. And since the Uprising obviously didn't do very well this season, Huck seems to be giving him a lot of creative freedom with the team. Yep, more changes for the Uprising, and probably a lot of them.
We're going to be evaluating all of our current players, all of our coaches, making a lot of changes. It's kind of tough, We're known as a team that, makes a lot of changes. But I think at least this year people are expecting it and think, it needs to happen to some degree.
This isn't new if you're an Uprising fan, but hopefully they'll finally be able to find some sort of stability with Mineral at the helm. Thank you guys so much for watching. What do you guys think about Huck's comments during this Q&A? Are you optimistic for the future? Let me know in the comments. While everyone's opinion is welcome, I really want to hear from Uprising fans here in particular. Do you think Huck did a good job representing your team? Do you feel like you're in a good position with Mineral as a head coach? Do you agree with the decisions that the team made now that you've heard their reasoning? Please let me know, I'm actually really curious. Obviously this was an hour-and-a-half long Q&A, so there was a lot I had to cut out, but don't worry, there's a few options if you want to learn more about this event. First of all, as I was watching the interview last night, I was transcribing and summarizing everything the best I could. There was a lot to keep up with, and I'm not the fastest typer, so I didn't get everything, but I got most of it. I posted my summary on Reddit, and I also made a Google document if you can't use Reddit for some reason. So for a more full summary of the interview, you can do that. But if you don't like reading, there's also the full VOD of the Q&A that's up on the Boston Uprising Twitch channel. So all three of those will be linked in the description. And of course, if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe with the notification bell for more content about competitive Overwatch. I would really appreciate it. Until next time though, that's all from me. Don't get tilted!